Welcome to Let's Get Writing. I'm your host, Catherine Taylor. Let's Get Writing is all about the writing process from creation to publication. And here is where we share the stories behind the stories and bring life to books. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel and never miss an episode. You can do that at youtube.com, Catherine Taylor TV. Now, my guest this week is originally from the beautiful Annapolis Valley, Nova Scotia. And I can say that because I went to Acadia and lived there for 4 years. But she's currently residing in Charlottetown, PEI. And she has a penchant for islands because her first book, The Blue Moth Motel, recently published by Breakwater Books here in Newfoundland and Labrador, began as a short story and then was written here in Newfoundland and Labrador. And I look forward to sharing her writing adventures with you. And join me in welcoming Olivia Robinson to Let's Get Writing. And I'll bring her into the screen. Hi, Olivia.
Hello. Thank you for having me. This is great.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you. And now your first book was published late in 2021. I think I'm right in saying that. How exciting. And you did your BA in English at UPEI, and then your master's in creative writing at Memorial University here in Newfoundland and Labrador. And now you're back again in PEI, working in the book industry at the Bookmark, which is an indie bookstore, which is so amazing to see that. So you've been island hopping very creatively.
Yes, I love islands. I didn't really notice that until one of my friends pointed it out to me. And I've yet to visit very many tropical islands, so maybe I should get on that. But for now, I'm very happy on this island.
Well, we're very happy that you spent time in Newfoundland and Labrador and that we were part of the creative process. And your publisher is from here, Breakwater Books. We were part of that process of your first book landing, on bookshelves near people. Actually, I'll put the image up on the screen here so people can see the cover. And there we go, The Blue Moth Motel.
Yeah, it's such a gorgeous cover. I remember when Rhonda, the designer at Breakwater, first sent me the image, like the first image of the cover. And I was just blown away. I was like, I hope the book is good enough to go in that cover because it's so perfect.
So. A cover is so important to a book, and it's nice that you would say that you had that feeling about it. And it's very intriguing. And once you know the story about this it's a family story, and we'll get into that. But and the role that the blue moth plays in it, and you see it right there. Its delicate wings. And of course, we can't overlook Puss down there.
Yes. Yeah, and you can't really tell from flat images of it, but the moth and the cat have like spot gloss on them. So they look a bit like glossy when you move the cover, which also adds just another layer of depth, which I love.
I hadn't really noticed, but you're right. It does give it that. It really draws you in. It's a really beautiful cover. And so let's open it. Let's turn the page and talk a little bit about the book. And when I first was speaking with you, I asked you, like, is it? I felt so real, and I thought, is this a true story? And you said.
No, most of it is made up, although a lot of the places are obviously places that I've visited. So I really enjoy books that have like vivid settings. So I really wanted to write a book where readers could really picture the world that the characters were living in. So part of the book takes place in the UK, and then part of it is on Prince Edward Island. And then there's a brief time where they also visit Nova Scotia to go on a camping trip. So I kind of tried to put in what I loved about all of those places into the settings. So some of those descriptions are definitely things I've observed from my life, just of the natural world. But in terms of the storyline itself and the plot, that's all made up.
Beautifully done, though, because when I spoke with you and I said, it felt like such a tender story. Just when I started to read it, I didn't want to put it down. I just kept continuing and wanting to know more about the relationships and the family dynamic, because I mean family means so many things today, and Nora and Ingrid, who are the daughters, they have an unconventional upbringing. They're brought up by two mothers, and so did you expect your first book, and I know it started as a short story, but did you expect it to explore such a kind of a tender story in such a beautiful way?
Oh, thank you for saying that. That's very kind. No, I definitely, I always wanted to write a novel, but never really had an idea of what that novel would be. But then, as you said, this started as a short story, and then I was in a class with Lisa Moore at MUN, and she was the one who encouraged me to expand it more. So it kind of became a novella from there, and then I was able to expand it even more to become my thesis, and then more to become this novel. So it's a story that has been evolving over many years. I think, what was the year when I first started writing it? Probably 2016, I would say. Was when the kind of short story first, the idea kind of came to me. But it has gone through many, many changes and many edits since then. Thanks to my wonderful editors at Breakwater, it definitely would not be the story that it is without them. And I can't remember who said it, but there was a writer who said that kind of having one name on the cover of a book is kind of misleading because there's so many people who have gone into the book. So even though I came up with the idea, the support from everyone else is what helped make it happen. And yeah, I'm very glad that this was my first novel.
Yeah, and very true. It is very true. A book is really the work of a community.
Yeah.
You mentioned your editors, and one of them, Claire Wilkshire, she's been on the show with her book, The Love Olympics, and I think Sue McLeod was your other editor. And
Yes.
I mean, books without editors are never the books with editors.
Exactly. Yeah. And I love Claire's short stories so much. That collection is wonderful. And there's a lot of similarities as well between her writing and mine. So we got along very well in the editing process, which I'm very grateful for.
Mm. And let's talk about that a little bit, because the short story, um, people can find that so challenging, and understandably, because it is short, and you don't have a lot to work with. You have to create within this time frame, and that's where you were focusing. So how did it feel? And I'm going to ask, is that a very favorite genre of you, to work with short stories?
Yeah, I enjoy reading short stories. They're very difficult to write, as I've learned. And I originally was going to write a collection of short stories for my thesis, but then I'd written a couple, and this short story, which was the beginning of the Blue Moth Motel, was definitely the strongest kind of idea. So I decided to run with that rather than try to write enough short stories to make up a collection. Although I hope someday to go back to writing short stories, because I really enjoy the challenge of having to tell a story in a more concise way, and how you really have to take care with every sentence and every word. Not that you don't have to in a novel, because you definitely do, but I think in a short story the stakes are higher, and I'm not very good at writing tension. My stories often lack tension, whereas short stories, just by nature, can be like tension is kind of built in because the story itself is so short. So you have to ramp up the stakes quickly, or else you're not going to keep the interest of your reader. So I really admire people who can write excellent short stories, and think that you can really improve your craft by writing short stories. So I hope to improve my writing and be able to write some good short stories in the future.
We'll be watching for that. But you said like your books don't contain a lot. Well, your book really, but contain a lot of tension. But your your book contains a lot that draws you in, and maybe tension of a different kind. Just wanting to know how these girls are going to grow up. How are they going to resolve? Things like Nora not wanting to look at people when she sings, or the different ways they adapt their lives. So there are things in there, and I mean, too, in talking about like a queer story, a queer love story, but that is not. It's not traditional in the sense that they're living. They're just living. There's not a lot of drama with that, but it's like an insight into a wonderful family dynamic that is not so traditional. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. You talk a little more about it.
Yeah, no, I understand. I wanted to, present a story where it was just queer people living their lives, figuring things out, even though like coming out narratives and all of those stories are extremely important. And it's amazing the amount of queer books that I see on lists that I'm going through for the bookstore of books that are forthcoming. So that's amazing to see, because when I was younger, I can't remember reading any books like that. And I kind of wanted to add a book to that canon, I guess, that just wasn't necessarily a coming out narrative, but showed, queer characters just living, and that there's drama and tension in life that isn't always directly related to someone's queerness. There can be other, lots of other things on the go,
Things.
which is just reality. So I think more and more of those stories are emerging now, which is wonderful.
Mhm.
And I feel very lucky to have been able to add one to the list.
Well, there are other things that you can feel very fortunate about, and we can feel very fortunate about. But you spent time on Fogo Island as part of writer in residence programs. Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, so I stayed in the community of Tilting on Fogo Island before I started my master's program and at MUN, and that was kind of where the idea for the short story where I first wrote the short story. I'd kind of been thinking about the idea for a little bit before then, but the writing residency with TRAX, which is the Tilting Recreation Cultural Society, and now they're partnered with Tilting Air, and there's two homes in the community of Tilting that artists and writers stay in over the warmer months. I think like late spring to early fall. And I was lucky enough to have the opportunity to stay in the Reardon House, which is this wonderful white white and green clapboard house, like just plopped down in the middle of a field, like right on the edge of the ocean, just the most perfect setting. I could see whales from my little front deck, and it was just the most incredible summer I've had in perhaps my whole life. And I was so lucky to be able to just have that time that I could devote to my writing and trying to establish a writing practice that worked for me. And I think, yeah, if I hadn't have had that experience, I wouldn't have been as prepared for my creative writing master's, and it just helped so much with everything that followed. And the people that I met there were so wonderful, and I get to at the end of every season, I guess. So every time an artist leaves and a new one arrives, there's a like end of season kind of event where the writers can read a bit of their work that they've been working on over the summer, and the visual artists can show some of what they've been working on. So I was lucky enough to take part in one of those events and read a little bit of the very early versions of the Blue Moth Motel. So I'm very grateful to everybody who was in the audience that day to hear the very rough first draft of this.
Well, and speaking of which, would you share a little bit of the book with us now? And we'll come back to that. It's wonderful that they have these creative programs for artists, and that FOGO is leading the way in this. And we could have many more locations in Newfoundland. Well, why don't you share a little bit of the story, and we'll listen for a moment.
Okay, I'm going to read from close to the beginning. I think this is on page 13. There are palm trees in the south of England. People plant them in their gardens, and somehow they survive the winter. This is only one item on a long list of things I've learned about living in the UK, but for some reason it's the one that surprises me most. I had never seen a real palm tree, so seeing one in the garden of a stone cottage with a thatched roof altered my idea of the place. The winters here are different too. The temperature rarely drops below freezing, and what would be considered a dusting of snow in Canada is enough to cancel schools and halt traffic here. I rent a room in a house in Lewis, a town I heard of because of Virginia Woolf. The woman who owns the house, Susan, works as a cleaner too. She helped me get the job cleaning the Airbnbs. Every evening when I return home, she's on the sofa in the kitchen with a glass of wine, watching Strictly Come Dancing or Landscape Artist of the Year. I often join her, accept the offer of a glass of white wine, and sit at the table. Susan sips her wine and slowly sinks deeper into the sofa until she drifts off. We don't know each other very well, but on the evenings when she falls asleep on the sofa, I put a blanket over her before going upstairs to my room. She looks younger and less tired when she's asleep. After leaving the doctor's office, all I want to do is sleep. But it's much too early, barely 3 o'clock, and the bed I'm thinking of isn't the one in my room in Susan's house, but the one I used to share with my older sister Nora at the Blue Moth. There's a difference between a home and home. One is the place you return to most nights. The other is the place to which you feel an obligation. Sometimes they're the same place, but not very often. People try to forget past versions of themselves, but I like to think that pieces of who we were remain in the places we've lived, our words lingering in the fabric of the bedroom curtains. And I'll stop there.
I want you to go on. It's that feeling that I had. Again, I felt it as you were reading when I read that book. Just the way the girls grew up and how they evolved, and their grandmother and their mothers, and the uniqueness of living and growing up in a motel. That's so PBI in some ways, because if you've been there in the summer, there are these motels that are kind of a little rural and not, they're not the flashy places, but they are. And I think you mentioned it in your book, like the place where sometimes you go and it's unique and you feel a feeling that you don't feel elsewhere. I know. Did I say that well?
Yes, definitely. Yeah, I wanted to capture that for sure. But also kind of show that they're just kids. So even though they are kind of growing up in this strange environment, it's kind of all they've known. So it's home to them. And I just thought that was an interesting setting to explore in a novel.
Oh, yeah. And the pool, of course. And the moth.
Yes.
The infamous moths that are quite elusive.
They are, yes.
Yeah, the different things that, I felt like when you brought the piano into that environment, it was beautiful. And I think it's something that a lot of people can relate to, when there's sort of a base of music or a center around life, and how how that impacts their lives. And
Yeah.
it was lovely.
As yeah, as someone who I cannot play the piano and I can't sing either, so I wanted to give my characters yeah, traits and talents that I don't have, so then I could live vicariously through them and pretend I could play the piano and also sing beautifully. So that was fun for me to be able to talk to some of my friends who can do both of those things to make sure that what I was writing was accurate to the experience of playing an instrument and singing. And I did used to sing in choir when I was younger, but either I stopped because someone told me I should stop or because I wanted to stop. I don't know. But yeah, but I admire people who can sing and play musical instruments. And I think being in Newfoundland also inspired me a lot because so many people in Newfoundland are just so talented and musical.
Yeah, that is
So
part of the homes and the lifestyle here for sure. Absolutely. Now, I think the path to publishing for you was maybe a little unconventional because you were part of Pitch Wars. And this was one, I think it was a virtual pitch war because it took place in 2020, late in 2020. Let's tell
yeah.
people about that. It was hosted by the Writers Alliance of Newfoundland and Labrador, who do wonderful things here to support the writing community. We can't begin or end to talk about what they do. But you went into a pitch war. Tell us all about that.
Yeah, so it was in December of 2020. And the Writers Alliance kind of sent out an email, I think in October, saying if you're interested in participating, send us an email and we'll enter your name in a draw because we can only select, I think it was 10 people because there's only so much time for pitches. So they selected the 10 people, and I was lucky enough to be one of those randomly selected. And it was on Zoom event, and there was representatives from all of the major Newfoundland publishers, and we got, I think, 3 minutes to pitch. So kind of that traditional elevator pitch, how everyone says you should have an elevator pitch of your novel at the ready just in case. So I prepared this elevator pitch, and the manuscript, as it was for my thesis, was finished. So I had a pretty close to done manuscript. It just needed some edits. So I pitched, and then all of the publishers have a chance to ask you a question. So then I answered each of their questions, and then I heard back from two of the publishers requesting to see the full manuscript. And then I heard back from Breakwater saying they would be interested in publishing it. And originally it was going to be for a fall 2022 release because usually publishers are always looking for kind of a year out from, or 2 years out from the current year. And then they just happened to have a space open up in their fall of 2021 catalog and felt that the novel could be ready by then with enough editing. So it was a very, very busy winter and spring of editing and tweaking of the novel to make sure it was as good as it can be. Although when I read it, sometimes when I read it aloud now, like reading parts, I will kind of leave words out or add words in. So I'm still like editing it, but I think that's allowed. But yeah, so that was a kind of definitely untraditional way, but I got my foot in the door and it did kind of fast track the process, which was incredible. So
Yeah, what an opportunity because, I mean, first of all, a little case of the nerves maybe to do a pitch like that. And I can imagine that you would have felt a little anxious doing it, but obviously you did a great job. And here you are now published because quite often that path to publishing can be much longer.
Yeah, it can take a long time. So I definitely feel lucky in that regard. Although I don't think, because it all happened so fast, I'm not sure if it has really fully sunk in yet. Like I've done a few of these interviews now, and some other. I had a wonderful launch back in November of 2021 here in Charlottetown at the Beaconsfield Historic House. Yeah, there's a picture of me signing. That was also bizarre to sign books, and it's still strange because we stock the book at Bookmark. So every once in a while, someone will just pick it up off the shelf, and then they come through the checkout, and I'm like, "Oh, this is my book. Would you like me to sign it for you?" Like, I still don't know how to not do that awkwardly.
I mean, it was a lot of work and a lot into it. You should be very proud. There you are. The book
Yeah,
for you. Or
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. That's at the launch. Yeah, and yeah, I love those sparkly tapestry shoes. I don't get to wear them very often, but they're the best.
That was a good occasion to wear them for sure because on click those heels together and it was kind of a magical event.
It was, yeah,
All came together, and we're so glad that Newfoundland was a part of this, Claire. And you had a good mentor, I'm sure, in Lisa Moore. She has been, helped so many people and supports the writing community here. So you really had a great team behind you, as well as Breakwater Books and the Writers Alliance helped get you there as well. Me.
definitely, yeah. I don't think, yeah, I would have become a writer as become a published writer as quickly as I have without my time in Newfoundland. So I love Newfoundland so much and hope to come back someday soon.
Well, that's a good note to end this. Everyone will love you for that comment. And again, Blue Moth Motel, there's the cover, and there's Puss on the cover and the moth. And I want to thank you so much, Olivia, for being part of the show and sharing your writing adventures with us.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Okay, a pleasure. And folks, don't forget to follow us on Facebook at Catherine Taylor Media, and also all the shows are hosted on YouTube at Catherine Taylor TV. Thank you for joining us, and have a great day.